Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda that was emailed out to all of us?
No, there's not. First item for tonight is a concept construction incentive program to promote middle housing. Let me share my screen here. So this is part of the West Side District 5-year action plan that we're working through. And one of the tasks of that action plan was to put together a construction incentive to pair with our other initiatives to promote housing over on the West Side. So tonight, I'm going to just do a little bit of the Hood River housing context and then discuss where this proposed construction incentive would fit into the city's overall housing strategies, and then get into the nuts and bolts of a concept for your review and discussion. So generally in Hood River, building is slowing. And that includes on the west side, even though that's where pretty much all of our remaining undeveloped land is. This graph shows the number of building permits for new homes within the boundaries of our West Side district going back for the last 10 years. You can see it's come down to a trickle. Home prices have stabilized in the last couple of years, but unfortunately they've stabilized at a really high and unachievable point for most buyers and families. You know, for as long as I've been watching housing prices, Hood River's tracked with Portland pretty closely, but during the pandemic, we really shot up to a new tier as far as price levels in Hood River and White Salmon. So really the gorge. And our population continues to grow and is continued to projected to grow. So when you have growing population, slowing building, and unattainable price points, you know, you really get displacement of workforce and younger families and just anyone who isn't able to outcompete everyone else for the scarce resource, which is housing in the gorge. This graph is somewhat emblematic of that. It's the percentage of school-age population in Hood River County. And we used to be 3 percentage points above the state average. And now we're only a single percentage point over the state average. And I would expect this is probably going to continue to decline as long as housing becomes so unattainable. So even in this environment of unaffordability, there is the option to promote and build smaller homes. This graph shows the correlation between home size and home price. See, even small home sizes are very expensive on the west side. These are all the homes that were built in the last 10 years on the west side and their current Zillow values. So smaller homes do present an opportunity to build maybe not affordable housing, but relatively more affordable housing than if they were larger homes. So that's the context of this construction incentive idea. And here's where the construction incentive lies as far as the continuum of all the efforts that we've been doing in Hood River, going all the way back to the adoption of the housing needs analysis in 2015, which sparked regulation of short-term rentals, updating code improvements to make building more efficient and easier, and just in all the number of things that we've been doing ever since. And plan for 2024 was to consider direct and offsite incentives for building more modest housing types. And so just really want to be clear that this is just one puzzle piece, but by all means, we're still pursuing 780 Rand Road, trying to do 780 Rand Road 3 more times. And so this is a part of the an all of the above strategy rather than one single silver bullet. So when I was thinking about how could a construction incentive be constructed, I was thinking about the bounds that it needs to be constructed within. And one is on the west side, we don't have today money, we have tomorrow money. That's just the nature of tax increment, is we'll get cash flow as the west side develops. So there's limited money to seed a program with big dollars on the front end. There is not a ton of administrative apparatus to administer a complex program. And as I was interviewing developers to build this proposal, there's really limited bandwidth on the developer side to become acquainted with, and understand and like basically pay attention to a complex program. It needs to be simple. Developers, especially developers that build in more than one community, like if we want to bring in developers from other communities, I see that they're scanning and they're doing quick back of the envelope calculations as they're trying to figure out where's the next place that they want to spend their limited time and attention. And then I know just generally for the City Council and the Urban Renewal Agency Board, this is new territory, providing any sort of subsidy to private for-profit development. So transparency and fairness and being very transparent upfront, being formula-based. Equal opportunity is going to be of critical importance. And then just again, reiterating that if we're providing a minor incentive to basically influence what's developers to build missing middle housing types, what we're going to get in Hood River's market is something that's relatively more affordable, not capital A affordable. And I think that's just something we have to come to grips with. As what being within the realm of the possible. So getting into the actual incentive proposal itself, really modeled quite a bit after Madras. They provide payments based on the tax increment. They in their urban renewal areas, they provide an incentive based on the amount of tax increment that a new housing development will generate. So they'll give a developer 50% of the value of all the tax increment that they're going to generate over the next 7 years as a direct payment at certificate of occupancy, or they'll provide a 100% tax rebate of all the tax increment that a housing product will generate over the next 7 years as an incentive. Now that's for any development. You build a 3,000 square foot home, you get that incentive. You build a 1,200 square foot home, you get that incentive. So what I really liked about this is that it matched the cash flows of the urban renewal district, but I knew that this wasn't tailored enough to be what would be acceptable for our leadership here. So I thought about what would be an alternative way to adjust an incentive. And I really cued off of development fees and development fee burden between different housing types. So if you look at a large single family home, and I have this example here on Car Drive, but it's really similar for really any large single family home. The system development charges plus the construction excise taxes and building permits. So altogether, I'm calling these the total development fees, be about $38,000 for a single family home. And if you compare that to a missing middle cottage cluster, be about 125,000, or the multifamily development over on Clearwater be approaching 400K. Obviously, they have to pay more. They're bigger developments, and they're more units. But if you look at it proportionately, not only are they paying more in absolute terms, they're paying more in percentage terms. And the reason for that is because many development fees are on a per unit basis. And that's because it's actually a legal requirement that our development fees have to be have a direct nexus to the impact that that development is having on the systems that the fees are being meant to pay for. And so whether or not you have a family in a small house or a family in a big house, they're both having the same impact on parks. And so they have to be charged the same impact fee. And but the necessary result of that is larger homes can spread that fixed cost over a bigger house that's going to sell for more money, where the smaller homes are, as a percentage of their construction cost, more highly burdened. But while the law dictates how we must charge those fees, urban renewal does give us the ability and a funding source to help rebate or mitigate that fee impact to the developer. So that's how I've thought about constructing this incentive, is looking at what would be the payment that would be necessary to equalize development fees, a development fee burden at 7% of construction value. And so for cottage cluster up on Whole Street, that'd be a payment of about $64,000. Or for the multifamily over on Clearwater, it'd be about $114,000 payment. But as I noted earlier, we don't have today money, we have tomorrow money. And so I need to find some way to finance this program. Talk to private sector lenders, Umpqua Bank and US Bank, none of them were interested in this. It's just too out of the box for them. I'm getting a little bit of interest from a community lending financial institution, and also Mid-Columbia Economic Development District is interested in talking more about this, be a financing source. But I think in the near term, this will probably need to be financed from borrowing from the city. So we borrow from the city, the Urban Renewal Agency would borrow from the city, and then repay the city with interest from tax increment generated by these underlying developments. And this is how long the repayment period would take in these for these example developments. Large single family receives 0 subsidy, so no payback time, but cottage cluster would take about 16 years of tax increment to pay back their incentive. And that Clearwater would take about 7 years of tax increment to pay back the incentive. And so what I'm proposing is a 1-year pilot program, a 5-year pilot program with $1.5 million of borrowing authority to be borrowed from the city at a reasonable interest rate. And would still need to be approved by city council, but talking with the finance director, that's a reasonable amount of money that the city has and could lend to the Urban Renewal Agency. And then just not to be a broken record, but just being really clear that, where this fits in is we've got the highly regulated, like 780 Rand Road gets tens of millions of dollars in federal tax subsidies. That's what's going to be affordable to that area median income in the 60% and below. And what the free market is producing right now is homes that are generally affordable to about 200% of our area median income and above. And what this program is targeted to do is just create something that's relatively more affordable than what the market would produce, and add a missing rung to the ladder, as some people refer to the housing supply. And I think we'd have, the Whole Street cottages that were just built up on Whole Street through our missing middle housing code. Those came on the market for over $700,000 a piece. And that's probably what would be first out of the pipeline with this program as well. But then, hopefully what would happen over time is as we unlock supply, build more supply onto the market, those upper income residents are now not competing with middle and lower income residents for such a small amount of supply. Hopefully some of this would then trickle into second ownership, third ownership, and be more attainable in that 100 to 120% level. So that's the concept, and I'll stop talking there and we can have a discussion.
Well, can you go back a couple of screens? Can you go to the comparison from Clearwater to the cluster One more.
This one?
Yes.
Mhm.
I'm trying to better understand, I understand the equalization of 7%. But the Clearwater cluster, how many units is that?
4 units,
That's how many?
4.
The Clearwater is just 4 units. Cottage cluster is 4.
Cottage cluster is 4. Oh, I'm sorry. Clearwater, I believe, is 30.
How many?
30, I believe.
I guess I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it. I don't understand it clearly enough to have an opinion one way or the other. But it feels like we're incentivizing the larger construction on a larger unit than the plus the 4 units. It doesn't feel, I hate to use this word, it doesn't feel equitable for the cluster, the cottage cluster versus the 4 unit kind of communal living. It feels like that's a larger discount to
the multifamily.
yes. I mean, it seems like that's an, is that incentive going to be, because there's no regulation like we would with McCad or other affordable housing that regulates what they can sell those 40 units for. We're giving, for example, and this might come back a little bit. I haven't heard anything from Stonehenge property or the realtor. I don't know if that's going through in process, but I guess maybe just better explain or dumb it down. No, you explained it very well.
Sure.
Dumb it down.
Yeah, so a couple points. One, so if you're interested in the cottage cluster getting more assistance, on a per unit basis, it certainly is in this example. So if you divide 64,000 by 4, that's $16,000 per unit. But if you take that 114,000 divided by 30, that's only a little less than $4,000 per unit. So actually, the cottage cluster is getting a much bigger subsidy on a per unit basis in this instance. Yes, there is. So I think your underlying point though is real valid. Is that this is not highly calibrated and tuned to get to kind of specifically make judgment calls between different housing types. And that gets into that issue of we can't handle complexity. So if we make this too much of like a points based or like submit an application and it goes through review and we'll score you, and based on that score, we'll see how much you can be awarded. All that is going to immediately turn off developers, and no one's really going to get interested or pay attention in this.
Back to the Stonehenge thing, I think they were asking for the city to cover some of the infrastructure for them. And that's not part of this. Is there kind of something in plans that you see?
Yeah. So Stonehenge, I haven't heard anything from them for a few months, so I'm not sure if that's alive or not. Where we left off, I believe they were asking for the equivalent about $40,000 per unit in subsidy, and that came in the form of helping with offsite infrastructure as well as just direct payment. And that will
direct payment as opposed to deferred taxes, because this is a deferred tax payment structure, correct? Or is it a direct subsidy to the builder?
Would be a direct subsidy given at certificate of occupancy, financed with the repayment source being the tax increment. Yeah.
And then as far as the city loaning urban renewal money, urban renewal, think back to city, is there a standard rate that we pay? Is that 6%?
Yeah, so the city does interfund loans quite often. And the law on that is just that it needs to be a reasonable interest rate. So what we've done in the past is we've looked at all governments in Oregon borrow money from not borrow, invest their money in what's called the local government investment pool. And that's managed by the Oregon State Treasury. And so usually we use that as what would the city be earning if it was in the local government investment pool. And then we think of some reasonable premium above that interest rate for the risk of the loan. Yeah, so LGIP is earning about 5% right now. So I would think something reasonable would be like add 3 points onto that and say 8%.
And
Mhm.
Let's see what's our substitute.
Mhm.
Good, down in front. Okay, so, thanks for this, Will, it looks very ingenious on a napkin. Um, Does the deferred money refunded to the builders does that burden the administration, which is already overburdened, as you put it?
I think this is the kind of simplest, easiest. Because we'd calculate it based on what equalizes you to 7% of your construction value. So that's simple math. And then we just cut a check and then we're done. There's no deed covenants, there's no ongoing monitoring, reporting. This is solely based on the assumption that if we get more supply of smaller sizes, it'll become relatively more affordable than what the market's doing already. So it's one check and then we're done. We have no ongoing monitoring responsibility.
Okay, then another question, not unrelated, is it possible to identify the remaining lots available for smaller run, like development in the city limit, or the expected city limit as gross?
We did do a buildable lands inventory in the late 2010s, which identified that. And then specifically for the west side district, which is where we have a funding source to actually do a program like this. I do have we put together for the constructability analysis that we're doing, which is another task of the 5-year action plan. Yes, I have every parcel in the west side district categorized as developed, underdeveloped, or vacant.
It should obviously just be available, it just it's not developed yet.
Right. So one of those 17 acres of that is the school district property.
And relatively unrelated, it's back to that data slide where they gave options of 50% in a check or double that over 7 years, which seemed completely ingenious to me. Like lotteries paid off the way they do, right?
Yeah, very much like lottery.
Is there a sense of which of those was most popular? And was that actually used in there?
I don't know. I don't know. It's been on my list to get a report from their community development director. Yeah.
How that's worked out. No, I think this is beautiful. It's really ingenious. I can see that it would be, I'm pretty familiar with that Hall Street projects.
Mhm.
Relative to Vancouver. Yeah.
Can you explain the difference of the rebate of 50% and 100%? Because it seems like, I just don't understand it. It seems like when they get half and when they get 11, they want 100. We choose one and then everybody gets that, and what?
Yeah.
Why is it 50 or 100? Why is there an option?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I stopped sharing just because for the people online, they may want to see our faces. So I just want to be clear that the program that I'm proposing is just the payment at certificate of occupancy. It's not, there isn't multiple options to choose from.
They have 2 options.
Yeah. But the reason is, so if you, there's certain developers out there who develop and hold, like multifamily, I think is a good example of that. The developer may choose to build it to continue to own it and rent it out. And so they'll be owning it to collect those tax rebates. But if we want to do really large scale developments for, really the only person doing that in Hood River right now is IDC. Mike Kettler, his group, and their model, and this is the standard model for like home builders, is you get a construction loan, you build a house, you sell it, you repay back your construction loan, so you can take out another construction loan to build another house to sell it. And so if you don't give that type of developer the payment at certificate of occupancy, it just doesn't work in their business model. So yeah.
So the certificate occupancy thing is somebody has to buy it and live there? I guess I just don't understand that.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just get so used to using all of these terms. So you get the building cycle is you get land use approval through the planning department, and then you go get your building permits. And then you build the house and building inspectors come and they make sure that you're building it to code. And then once you complete the home and you get your final inspection from the county saying, yep, electrical safe, plumbing safe, you built a sturdy house that meets all code, they give you a certificate of occupancy, which means it can now be occupied. So it is before it sells to its final owner resident. But it is at the point where it will be taxed. And that's what we care about, is we want to make sure that this gets to the point that it's going to go onto the tax rolls, because that means that we'll have a way to pay ourselves back.
And the tax gets figured out because it doesn't matter what it sells for, there's a assessed value, and we can figure that out without having a sale.
Yep, real market values and assessed values got divorced in the 1990s. And yeah.
I had another question about, well, I guess. I like the theory of the trickle down. It doesn't seem like at the beginning, they're gonna be that much more affordable. I totally understand that. I guess the goal is to have a trickle down. Has that happened in other communities that have done similar things? They've seen good results from?
Yeah, I listed, I do think that that's definitely the rub, right? I think that has been an issue that has been debated in Hood River for as long as I've been here, and probably way before that too, is like in such a small town next to the Portland metropolitan area, do we move the needle to the point that we have any bearing on supply and demand in the market? I don't think we're going to resolve that. But I did put in 2 links in the staff report to a literature review from UCLA that had found that additional supply does positively impact housing prices, even at the neighborhood scale. So that's promising. And then also there was a study in Portland just out in 2024 that studied housing prices in urban renewal districts that had housing programs, and they found that housing prices grew more slowly in those urban renewal districts than in the rest of the city. But as in any social science type environment, right? We can never know exactly what the cause was. Mm-hmm.
Okay, my last question is about, you said like a 5-year trial for whatever period. Does that mean that we would have that money over 5 years, we would do that, but that's still, I guess the 5 years and the 7-year taxes is not really, right? We would just try this for 5 years, see how it goes, who builds and what is built and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, I guess, even more restrictive than the 5-year idea is that $1.5 million of initial allocation. I think that's a good starting amount to get a significant number of developments going. And hopefully it's also enough to create some urgency with builders. As I've been talking, interviewed several builders while I was putting this proposal together, and it's clear they're all waiting for finance, for interest rates to go down and for construction costs to level off. And so what I'm hoping is if we have a first come, first served limited amount of money, we'll get people off their hands to go out there and just take a risk and get moving. Yeah.
This looks like it makes sense. I mean, we're speculating on inventory. It's basically supply and demand. So trying to increase the supply, it's not making the houses really affordable on your scale. And the reality is a builder is going to sell property for as much as they can. It's just going to entice the builder to build the property at a little bit of a savings. And I see what the 5 years, the speculation is with more supply that would bring down the potential sale price of homes. Mm-hmm. I think we did the same thing with affordable housing, rentals, short-term rentals in the community too. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's weird to speculate on that. And I like the idea that we have a 5-year plan just to see if this does indeed entice anyone. My last kind of tie-up is you showed the mattress model. Do you have any information from Madras as far as their building as of current? I assume everybody's plateaued with as expensive as money is right now, but did this work well for Madras?
I need to set up a meeting with their community development director. Just bring this as a concept right now, but also what I'm hoping to hear is what additional information are people gonna want before we recommend this for final approval. And so definitely with, I'm hearing more information from that as far as lessons learned and success. Yeah.
Thanks, Will. Could you go to the slide that had the 3 projects and the percentages, bringing them down to 7?
Yeah, and I'm realizing just as I'm talking that I did not specify that those 2 are examples of ones that would be eligible because they were built under the missing middle housing code or they were multifamily. I did not mention that, and that's absolutely key. I apologize. But yes, so this cottage cluster was the very first housing development built under the city's missing middle housing code, which caps sizes at 1,200 square foot per home. So that's why that would be the clear defining line as to who's in for this incentive and who's out. It's either multifamily or missing middle housing code.
And the 64,000 rebates, so to speak, is a higher percent because the cost of the project was smaller. Is that why one's 14%, one's a little less than 10%?
Yeah, it has to do with just looking at the total development fees. So this right here, and then comparing them to their construction cost. And that there's a international association that puts together annually construction cost by housing type and by materials. It's this very enormous spreadsheet, and it's how we calculate building permit costs, because many building permits are the cost of your construction cost as specified in this table. So it's that amount times the number of square feet. And so it just turns out that, so that's the denominator. And then the numerator is the development fees that would have to be paid. Sorry, maybe that was too much detail.
It's all right.
Okay.
Helpful.
Good. Another way to look at that without being intrusive is that it's a penalty for building in that run section. It's a tax penalty for those builders that have to pay more percentage of their building costs because of the size of the buildings, right? So this ingenious plan says, let's mitigate that.
Could you go to the slide showing the mattress examples?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I understand it, you're using the mattress as an example, but theirs is a percent and ours is actually bringing it down to 7%. So they're not exactly the same.
No, yes, yeah, I brought this up just to show that there is an urban renewal agency out there that is using tax increment to provide subsidy to housing developers. But theirs is not tailored in any way. So you could build a 5,000 square foot home and you would actually get a bigger rebate because you're adding more tax increment to the rolls in Madras. So the way that I constructed ours to be bigger or smaller, just based on whatever you need to get to be on the same playing field as a single family home. So to get everyone basically fighting fair with that house over on Carr Drive, that's how I chose to tailor it. And I think it's a way that can make it simple so that all builders know, hey, if I use missing middle housing code and if I build multifamily, I know that I can cap my development fees at 7%. Yeah.
Do you know of any other cities or urban renewal areas that used your model, just bringing it down to a flat 7% or something?
No.
We're kind of treading the water, which is all right.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go to the slide that showed the rungs?
Oh, yeah.
So as we've heard some comments already, this may help out by increasing supply. the middle rungs still don't seem to be getting addressed. I don't know the history of Hood River's housing, affordable housing program, but some cities have a percent requirement with a fee in lieu if, you know, you've only got a couple of units or something. 10% of a unit. I assume Hood Rivers explored that kind of idea to fill in these middle rungs, and it's not supported.
Yeah, well, we have closing in on it, right? So hopefully, if this is successful, the first sale will be very high, right? Brand new home, very expensive, but you get to the second owner and your third owner. And so hopefully over time, it will trickle down so that we do build up that middle. We have thought about through our affordable housing strategy, some of the things that you're talking about. I know in Portland, right? If you're building a multifamily, 20% of your units have to be regulated or have to be income regulated. That had the impact of significantly reducing construction. So construction supply went way down. Well, actually, it went way up in advance of that new regulation as everyone tried to beat it. But since then has really slowed down development in Portland. And actually, the Portland auditor just issued an audit in May saying that there was insignificant controls and monitoring, and that the Housing Bureau in Portland was 2 years behind, even looking over the voluntary compliance reports versus doing any sort of active compliance. And so I'm just, that's in a city as big as Portland. So I think here in the Hood River context, regulations like that seem conceptually pretty easy, you know, just mandate that they do something. But then when you get into compliance and monitoring, that's where it really becomes unfeasible.
I like your suggestion, your proposal. I think it's a good start, and you've got some periods in there where, okay, if it's not working, you can modify it or take a fresh look at it. So I'm okay with it. I would like the city to explore some other tools in the toolbox, so to speak, to get more of these runs.
Yeah.
Whether it's a fee in lieu or some other mechanism. That's not my choice to recommend a specific approach. Exploring other options as well. I'm not sure, Hood River is so desirable, I'm not sure just adding more homes. I've worked in cities that were on the coast and they were very popular, and the concern was adding homes. Well, it just brought more people who want to live there. And it's not necessarily affordable until we de-restrict it somehow. Anyways, I like your proposal.
I like it too. Well, I don't like the idea of devaluing property as a property owner. So I think, you know, the model that kind of shows getting that more central rung as a property owner, that doesn't make me feel very good, you know, for my investments. And just again, I don't have any of the answers. I think this is a good start. I like the idea of like moratorium or 5 years, whatever you call it. But I feel like if we're just trying to increase building, we should do something similar to Madras with a % discount across the board based on, and you know, just single unit price, you know, as opposed to equalizing or equity. And then if we have something like McKed or somebody else that wants to do affordable housing, then we provide more incentives for income-based housing. I think these are two separate things. If we're trying to increase building, it would be discounting permitting fees and things like that. But if we're trying to, this has nothing to do with affordable housing other than devaluing property in the long run by increasing supply.
So I feel like I understand this to be specifically encouraging the missing middle code housing only, like the Madras example, that seemed like it was just for single family houses across the board, including the $2 million mansions out of the west end of town. And it seems like if we do the Madras option, then we're just giving everybody who wants to build anything, maybe not specifically what.
No, I think the incentives should be regulated by, like, Will, you had mentioned other housing units that require median household income to be used for what you can sell the house for. So if we're trying to regulate affordable housing, I don't think this is the tool to do that. I think if we want to have affordable housing, we should provide maybe even larger incentives, larger discounts to builders that want to build lots or 10 plexes, 20 plexes, apartments that for sale. But then we require those projects to be regulated by median household income. You know, to provide 20% or 30% of sales to be to specific things that I believe McKed does this already. Or who did the county housing across from West Schwab?
That was the housing authority, Mid-Columbia Housing Authority.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, but McKed did make a loan to the Clearwater multifamily. And as long as they're paying back the loan to McKed, they have to keep their rents, I think, affordable at 120% of area median income.
So I think it's good. I think it's just two different creatures. I don't think this addresses affordable housing.
Well, and I think that Will said that initially, this is not affordable housing.
No,
This is
No, it's encourages.
If I can butt in, this is the part where I'd say that I was on the Affordable Housing Task Force. And I think that I got really excited when I read this proposal because I feel like one of the conversations that's happened over and over discussing affordable housing. Is that there are basically only two ways that we're gonna get the kind of affordable housing that people want to see in Hood River. And that's rich people donating their land to have it turned into that kind of housing, or the city buying the land to develop basically public housing projects in collaboration with the state and however they want to do that, which is really complicated. Or not that desirable, it seems so far. So this is like another thing that was basically discussed. I think you had a chart of the affordable housing plan that included this as one of those kind of higher level ideas that we had come up with as a thing we wanted to see. So like land banking is the people who have land being willing to donate it or sell it at a reduced price so that the development overall is, you know, lower in cost. But this in particular, I feel like really, yeah, it's not gonna get us the $250,000 single family homes that we know people need. But it is at least going to start triggering the idea that this missing middle development, which is still not really happening, is something that people wanna do. And I do like that idea of having that like first come, first serve, come and get it, boys.
And it's
You know.
if that's considered for you,
Yeah,
1,200 square feet, is that?
under 1,200 square feet for the whole thing.
Okay.
And Clint, I believe those are all 2 bedrooms, but it sounds
All
like,
individual homes with individual walls, and they kind of share a driveway, a communal driveway. It's worth looking there.
No, I think this, I feel good about this, and I like the idea that we're trying something. I would encourage you to follow up like you said you were with Mattress, just to see if there's some pitfalls that we can learn from them. But theirs isn't, I don't think theirs doesn't do what yours does. Theirs is just kind of like a discount across the board.
correct, that's increasing supply of all types.
Right.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I think this would create incentives for clusters and larger units.
Just to be clear, it would only be applicable to multifamily or more than a standalone single.
Yeah, it would be applicable to anyone who builds using the missing middle housing code. The missing middle housing code caps that allows for single family, cottage cluster, and townhomes, but every dwelling must be 1,200 square feet or less. And then,
So it could apply to a single family standalone if that was 1,200 square feet.
correct.
Okay.
And then I have in your packet recommendations for unit caps sizes for multifamily that are based on the number of bedrooms. So that we don't, the goal is, the apartments over Doppio, those are wonderful, great apartments to have in town, but they're maybe not something that we want to subsidize with public money. So doing some sort of cap that, keeps multifamily in that more naturally affordable level.
Maybe we should never bring those apartments up as affordable.
I have one more question. Have not really followed the short-term rental like regulations where they're at. And I'm just curious, like, what does West Side fall? I know they're pretty tight in the city limits, but like, I'm not sure what they are on the west side of the county, I guess, so. Another concern would be people buying these and then using the short-term rentals instead of them actually getting into people residents.
Yeah, short-term rental regulation applies uniformly across the city and it's based on zone. So, in residential zones, the short-term rental must be owner occupied. So you cannot, anywhere on the west side that's zoned residential, you can't build a house and then live outside of Hood River and have it be a short-term rental. You have to live there. And then it can only be used 90 days per year as a short-term rental.
So it's even out, because I like the whole west side isn't in the city limits, right?
Some of it's unincorporated.
But that still applies to, I'm just, since this is one of the west side plan, I just wanna.
Yeah, so that gets into another issue of annexation policy. But yeah, basically, in 2016, the city passed a resolution saying we will not extend sewer extraterritorially anymore. We're gonna stop that practice. And so that's basically then required anyone who wants to develop outside the city will have to annex to get sewer. Once they annex, they'll be under our short-term rental rules. It's kind of a roundabout way to the same answer. Yeah. And I should say that's residential. In commercial zones, you can buy a home as an investment property, live outside of the city and have unlimited short-term rental use in commercial zones. But there can only be one license issued per owner. So you can't buy like an entire multifamily building and turn it all into short-term rentals. You have to become a hotel to do that.
Will you have any feedback, or thoughts from builders or prospective builders about this idea? Yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed about 6 builders, developers when I was putting this together. And one of the ways that I changed was after talking to Mike Kettler with IBC, who's really the builder left in town. He was saying, yeah, it can't be a property tax rebate. That means nothing. So that's where I got into what can we finance to give it a certificate of occupancy. But other feedback was just generally folks not interested in building the missing middle, not interested in building that small anyway, or thinking that this amount of money wasn't enough. But honestly, anytime I hear from a developer that they want more money, that's kind of with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
is this something that you're gonna, I know you said you don't want us to make any motions or anything on this one. Do you think you'll have this back to us as far as a need for us to present?
I will bring this back to you before formal adoption. So what I plan to do is I took it a little out of order. I took this to URA board last week just because I wanted to get things moving. But it got positive reception from them as well. And so I'm going to take the feedback I heard here, plus the feedback I heard from the URA board, and I'm going to put this into a fully fleshed out and developed program application, administrative rules, so to speak, and have it all the T's crossed and I's dotted for formal adoption, hopefully in August. Great, thank you so much for that discussion. No PowerPoint for the next item. It's just what to do with 1217 May Street. So that's the home that we purchased in the Heights to accommodate future roundabout. And we close on July 1st. We'll get the keys. And now we have a home, which Urban Renewal Agency has never owned before. So looked into options as far as we could long-term rent it, short-term rent it. Both of those come with significant kind of burden for dealing with issues, as well as liability that, a private landlord may say, oh, there's, lead paint on the exterior of the house, that's fine, you know, it's no problem. But when you're a government entity and you're the government renting it out, that becomes a much bigger issue. So we're kind of, so as I talked to that and talked to our insurance agent, kind of crossed out using it as a money-making operation as not worth the juice not being worth the squeeze. So I have in your packet a proposed process to do issue a request for letters of interest from nonprofit or other governmental entities to see if there's anyone out there who wants to make use of the property. It's you know, in average shape for a home that's over 100 years old. There's certainly some issues. But I was thinking, you know, we'll put the feelers out there, and if anyone wants to take on the burden of fixing it up, and they want to use it for a public purpose, make it available, do a what's called a ground lease or a triple net lease, where basically we wash our hands of it. It's theirs for the term of the lease. We give it to them for no money, but they take all the liability and they take up all the responsibility for fixing it up to whatever standards they feel it needs to be at for their use. And yeah, see what we get.
I think you have a fish on already. I sit on the foundation for the hospital board. Are you thinking a triple net lease with no revenue back for your rent at all?
Right.
I mean, it might be, even if it's very nominal. I know the hospital and some of my conversations there, they would love to have it for residents, and it seems very practical.
Wonderful.
But it also seems that I love having Providence in town, you know, they don't contribute that much to our urban renewal fund as it is. Maybe
I think not a nonprofit.
they provide that.
Well, it's trying to be like a for-profit.
Yeah,
They're actually
they are
nonprofit.
a religious component, they're non-tax,
No.
so. So I think the foundation or the hospital board would, you know, be willing to maintain and probably also cover a nominal expense or something, you know, for as a rental. I don't think we need to offer it up for free.
Traveling nurses or something like that, that's great.
Yeah, well, I think the talk is the residents, but also I don't know how big the house is or if they can go in and build it out into rooms or what have you, but. Go ahead.
I would oppose that idea, but I definitely would like to see other organizations have an opportunity to further have the right, like, I don't know, domestic violence shelter or looking at the other nonprofit, good, small places that we have around town that we could use. I mean, everybody could use housing in some way, space.
I like the idea of, yeah, seeing who wants and needs it. And I think that's a great idea.
I'm good with, but what is a triple net lease?
Triple net lease, yeah.
Like fishing nets.
It means why is it called triple net? Just means you basically, you take over, you pay lease, you pay utilities, you pay, I think this is why. So you pay a lease cost, ours would be zero. You pay any property taxes, again, ours would be zero. And you pay all utilities. So basically, yeah, it's
Anything improvements to.
improvements to it.
So.
Mhm,
I think the insurance would be a big one too.
mhm.
That's. They would have insurance liability.
Yeah, very common in commercial real estate. So like Starbucks, McDonald's, places that wanted their building to be theirs and they want to own it and they want it to look like their brand, but they don't own the property underneath it. That's common for that.
Is that property C2?
It's commercial for sure. Actually, I don't know if it's C1 or C2. C1. C1. Mhm. Yeah,
Has there been any activity on the corner property?
no, I haven't been in contact with those folks, but I do plan on reaching out with them and just letting them know of the deal that we got to with 1217 May. Let them know there's no rush, no pressure, but if they ever are interested, we'd love to talk to them.
You know what it's being used as?
The house on the corner?
Yeah.
I think that's primary residence. Yeah, if you go one house over in the other direction, That's an investment property, but with a long-term tenant.
What about the property that's first at the old Lake Tahoe?
Yeah,
Is there any, I mean,
I don't
I
know.
know none of our plans show a road going through there. Is there any incentive for us to? I know we don't need to acquire that property, and this isn't something that urban does often. Is there any incentive for us to acquire that property?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly nothing with the Heights Streetscape plan. Yeah. I mean, if we wanted to do another like 780 Rand Road and like, but I don't, the kind of the priority seems to be Heights Streetscape plan right now, and we don't have even enough money for that, so. Great. So I'm planning on, sending out this draft request for letters of interest. My best thought right now is to pull a database of all tax exempt organizations on the assessor's tax rolls. So like everyone who doesn't have to pay property tax. But I think that will miss every nonprofit that doesn't own land. So if anyone has any good ideas of other places to get lists to make sure everyone who should get this gets this, let me know offline or. Yeah. Okay, and then the last item is just an update on the jurisdictional transfer process for the 281 on the Heights District jurisdictional transfer. We submitted our pre-application to the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee. So the committee that was created by the legislature to review that and recommend up to 3 jurisdictional transfers every 2 years to the legislature for appropriations. Our pre-application, so of the 3 to recommend, there was 2 applicants, us and Tigard. So we had pretty good odds. But ours was selected, and so we've been given the full application to turn in, and they're hoping to have that in by July 19th. So I'm working on that. I'm going to work with MIG, the folks who helped us with the streetscape plan. One issue that's really bubbling to the surface is if we take authority for the roadway, that will come with responsibility for putting in ADA curb ramps by fiscal year 2028, which is when ODOT is required to do them. The problem with that is where they're currently located is not exactly where they're located in the Heights Streetscape plan. And obviously curb ramps are attached to sidewalks and part of integrated systems. And so getting those into their final locations by FY28 doesn't align with the implementation plan of the Heights Streetscape, the current implementation plan, which is phased to do 13th Street, then the roundabout, then 12th Street, basically. And so if we need to get those curb ramps on 12th Street into their correct locations as quickly as possible, that means leapfrogging ahead of that roundabout. So I'm working with MIG to see if that can be done and what the bare minimum critical path projects are to get those curb ramps where they need to be. And then to price that out. And then once I have a price for that, I'm intending that will be our ask of the legislature is please give us the gap funding to get so that we can fulfill the obligations of a jurisdictional transfer.
Does that money affect our maximum indebtedness, or does that money go to the city and the city covers that expenditure for that portion of the road?
Yeah, it could go to the city or to the agency. It would have no impact on maximum indebtedness either way. It's considered program income. So similar to here in the Columbia Cascade District, most times when we did improvements on Oak Street and then on the State Street, urban renewal money was paired with a local improvement district, which did an assessment on property owners that had frontage onto the streets. And so the amount of money that came from property assessments was just paired with urban renewal money with no impact to maximum indebtedness, and grants and other money from the state would be the exact same way.
And down the road, we'll have to do something because we're taking on huge project with this current streetscape plan, but that's really only a third of the project, you know, if you consider the scope of our geographical boundaries, so anticipate we're gonna spend most of our money on the 12th and 13th, but, you know, we don't want to neglect the lower portion or out in front. The roads are, that's so.
Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get as much from the legislature as we can.
I was gonna say, don't, we need to make a motion about the 12-17 next.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that would be great. That, formal action
So motion to prepare your,
to support releasing the letter of interest.
I move to the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee support issuing a request for letters of interest from nonprofits to evaluate their interest in using 12-17 Main Street during the interim period before the property is needed for heights, streetscape improvements.
I'll second.
motion, second, any other conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
During that motion.
That's all.
Thank you for that catch.
I had one more quick question, Will, about the, yeah, my train just derailed. No, it wasn't your fault.
I did.
The curb flip flop, does moving that from C to A impact the division of the one-way street off the way? How does it impact? Is that the next time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and what we're asking MIG to do with help from DKS, you know, not to bury the lead, is look, can we switch to two-way on 13th without a roundabout? If, as long as we do get a roundabout in there sooner or later. Because the roundabout is necessary in order to meet 20-year growth projections. But it's potentially that 13th could be north-south two-way with just stop signs at the east-west at today's traffic volumes. Yeah. Mhm.
That was my expected answer to that. And then just as, I'm not gonna be done saying this, but as an aside, thanks again for the stop at a second. Marvelous. Every time I go through there, I'm so impressed.
Oh.
Any other questions for Will?
On these three items that he, any other items from us?
No, I had a quick question. Well, I wasn't at the May meeting, and so I was going through the minutes, and I believe there's a reference to city council amending the bylaws, and they're absorbing the urban renewal advisory board into the council. Is that accurate?
No changes have been made to the advisory committee. The
But the board itself, the urban renewal board.
Urban Renewal Board will now be the same membership as the city council, starting January 1st of 2025.
So they'll still have to adjourn and reconvene as the board?
No getting around that, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does that mean that, like, the people from the port and those people aren't on it anymore, or?
Correct, yeah, and the port commissioners sent a letter saying that they did not see any need to sit on the Urban Renewal Agency board anymore with the closure of downtown and the waterfront. Yeah.
Other items? Rather short meeting, but a lot of meat and potatoes. Thank you, Will. We'll go ahead and adjourn.